Okay. You know how we always mention how I'm like Tarantino's biggest fan, pretty much.
Of course.
I'm sure there's plenty of people on YouTube that will fight me for that title, but you get what I mean.
He will win.
And I literally cannot go one review without saying, this movie did this, but Tarantino did it better in this. Or I just make a random reference to a movie that Tarantino did, or something that Tarantino said. So you thought it would be a good idea if I just went through all Tarantino's movies and just raved about them.
Yes!
One by one.
It is the summer of Tarantino here on Pop.
Including the ones that he wrote, like True Romance and Natural Born Killers and From Dusk Till Dawn. So I will not be reviewing the episode of The Golden Girls where he was one of the Elvis impersonators, but nor his episode of CSI about one of the guys being buried alive, but you know.
You've talked more about it than some people have.
Yeah, it's that just now.
Exactly.
So obviously we got to start from the beginning. Well, not quite the beginning, because Quentin was able to make Reservoir Dogs because he sold the script for True Romance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing was yeah, I'll rave it. I'm going to give you some boring education on Reservoir Dogs, and then I'll talk about how much I love it, I guess. I don't really know how this is working, I'm just going. He gave Tony Scott the scripts for True Romance and Reservoir Dogs. And Tony Scott actually wanted to direct Reservoir Dogs instead of True Romance.
Nice.
But Quentin said, no, I want Reservoir Dogs. I guess he just wanted, feedback.
Okay.
But, yeah, they had bought True Romance and Tony Scott directed it. And then buying the script for True Romance gave him enough money to make Reservoir Dogs. On top of the fact that he knew somebody that knew Harvey Keitel, that helped too.
That always helps.
Yeah, everybody is... This is probably his... For the most part, it's pretty much well known as being the other most beloved Tarantino movie besides Pulp Fiction.
Yes.
Like, if you ask somebody their favorite Tarantino movie, chances are they're going to say Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs. So, the plot is really simple. The movie is simple. It's an hour 40.
Okay.
Maybe an hour 35, just straight to the point. But it definitely...
It feels longer, but it feels like there's more to it. But there's a lot packed into that time, too.
Yeah, with this started with the Tarantino style of just... The timeline is just... The timeline is very well constructed by Sally Mangy, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like they just took the scenes and put them in a blender. Well, the thing is this was the start of a lot of things like that. I mean, movies did the out of order thing. Like that goes all the way back to Citizen Kane starting.
Yeah.
And going back. But even long before that. But it also was the start of a lot of things like graphic violence in indie movies.
Oh yeah.
There was actually, I read, you know how almost all movies nowadays, especially big movies, have character posters?
Yeah.
Like just posters that are just one of the characters, and you can there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, of course.
Apparently this was one of the first movies to ever do that. They did, the marketing campaign did character posters for all of them. And I guess that was like a novelty back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, obviously, actually when it's almost impossible for me, but a few times I've been asked to rank Tarantino's movies from best to worst. Reservoir Dogs is surprisingly low, but, that's this piece of gold may not have quite the twinkling shine of this piece of gold.
Yeah, okay.
But it's close.
But it's still gold.
Or something, some analogy like that. Whatever.
We'll go with that.
So, but the thing is this has a lot of stuff to love in it, especially a lot of stuff that's, really hidden in there. There's one of the things I love is there's all kinds of shit that's in there just to be in there that's hidden that you can just point out. obviously, the rat everybody's looking for is Mr. Orange. And so, at the scene at the very beginning, they're at the table, at the dining room table, and Joe says, everybody throw in $1, and then, of course, Mr. Pink doesn't throw in. So, and of course, this movie started at any time, you have a friend or something that's a bad tipper or doesn't tip at all, there's always going to be a Reservoir Dogs reference.
Yep.
That person will call you Mr. Pink, you'll talk about the world's smallest violin, and you'll just get into this whole thing.
And it happens all the time, too.
Learn to fucking type, somebody will say that.
Exactly.
But the thing is when Joe comes back, he's counting the money, and he realizes somebody didn't throw $1 in, and he says, who didn't put in? It's Mr. Orange that immediately rats out Mr. Pink.
Of course! Pass the heat.
Secondly, and of course, there's the other clue where Eddie is driving down the street and he's on the phone, and he's talking about he's trying to figure out who the rat is, and he doesn't know. When Eddie's driving down the street, there's an orange balloon bouncing down the street behind his car.
Nice.
And then there's okay, so there's the beginning. There's 2 of these actually, and it's in the same area. At the beginning, they take Mr. Orange into the warehouse, and it's Mr. White and Mr. Pink. And Mr. Orange is on the floor, bleeding to death. Well, Mr. Pink and Mr. White go into the next room, and I guess there is like 2 white colored shirts because they're wearing the same clothes.
Yeah.
There's 2 white colored shirts that are like upright, and then I guess if you look in the corner, there's like an orange rag laying on the floor. And it kind of, just looking at the 2 shirts and the rag, shows you the position the 2 are in right now.
That's awesome.
And then also, if you look, apparently there's bottles of soap on the sink. And there's, to separate them, obviously, because Mr. Orange is the rat, there's a white bottle of soap and a pink bottle of soap. And then away from them on the other side of the sink is an orange bottle of soap. Wow.
That's awesome.
Just little shit like that is just in there. Like, just the detail that went into that is great. Speaking of the dining room scene, there is a funny thing I want to mention about, one of the most famous scenes in the movie is the very opening scene, like the very first thing you hear when the movie starts is Tarantino's voice, and it's Mr. Brown doing a dialogue about the real meaning of like a virgin.
Yes.
Which he talks about, it's about a guy whose dick is so big, when women have him, it's like the first time. Well, Madonna actually sent Tarantino a CD, whichever album had that song on it.
Okay.
And it was signed, It's Not About Dick, It's About Love, and she signed it Madonna.
That's awesome.
And there's also some, another one of those symbolic things that's apparently not on purpose, from the way I understand. Obviously, this warehouse is a warehouse of death.
Oh, yeah.
Because they, with the exception of Mr. Pink, but including Marvin Nash, pretty much every major character dies in this warehouse. Where they shot it, that actually wasn't a warehouse. That was actually an old mortuary.
Wow. That's great.
And you see Mr. There's this thing that's kind of covered up, and you see Michael Madsen sitting on it, while Mr. White's yelling at him. Apparently everybody assumes that's just a covered crate.
Is that a casket?
It's a hearse.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, it's just all kinds of intentional and unintentional symbolism and foreshadowing in this one area.
That's awesome.
There is also the detail of Mr. Blunt. Everybody talks about how Mr. Blunt is a psychopath. Yeah. Which we clearly see in the scene where he tortures Marvin.
Yes.
He cuts the ear off, he douses him in gas.
Another iconic scene from the movie.
And he apparently, the whole reason the robbery went wrong is because Mr. Blunt just started killing people in the bank for no reason. He claimed somebody set off an alarm, but the other guys on the job denied that ever happened. Apparently Mr. Blunt just wanted to kill people.
Yeah, well.
So despite the big psychopath that he's built up to be, Mr. Blunt never kills anybody on screen.
That's true.
He comes this close before he, gets killed himself.
Well, yeah.
I guess you can talk about the in joke that if your name is Marvin and you're in a Tarantino movie, something horrible is going to happen to you.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
See, there's another detail that I still have trouble catching. Like, I guess sometimes you can see it, but I guess sometimes you can hear it, but it's really difficult.
Okay.
People question what happened to Mr. Pink because after the Mexican standoff, everybody shoots each other.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Pink comes out of hiding and grabs the diamonds and runs out. Well, what happens is Mr. Pink is, if you listen really close, like if you amp up your volume while Mr. White is crawling over to Mr. Orange, you can hear the cops stopping Mr. Pink outside.
Yeah.
Like you can hear guns going off, and then really briefly, really quietly, you can hear Buscemi's voice saying, "Stop shooting at me! I'm already shot." And then I guess you can hear them arresting him.
I think I've actually heard that before, but I took somebody like you to point that out to me.
It helped in the theater. I finally got to see it in the theater this past December when they.
Yeah, I'd like to have been there for that.
They did it in Pulp Fiction in the same week, which was actually Here's the thing: is it's fun to be in a theater with scattered people because it's like a personal moment for you in like a big way, but then it's also great to go to the theater and be within a giant crowd.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people in the Pulp Fiction showing. There was me and my brother, and then 2 other guys were in the Reservoir Dogs showing. And one of the guys that was in there was somebody that worked there.
That's awesome.
But yeah, for some reason it worked that way. Like, it's great. It would have been great, to see them both with a crowd. But for some reason, Reservoir Dogs just fit just you and a few dudes in a theater.
Yeah.
For some reason, it just felt right.
I'd like to have joined you for that.
And there's talking about the Tarantino storyline. There's a particular scene that really stands out. That takes you can't really say it takes Tarantino to another level because this is his first movie, but people talk about Tarantino's flashback things.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing: is there's a particular scene that's very interesting, and I've never seen a movie do something like it before or after. The big plan for Mr. Orange to prove, well, obviously he's a cop, but to prove that he's not a cop, is to go to the bar with Larry and Joe and tell them this story about him going into a bathroom. Okay, well, this story is told within a flashback. And then, while the story is being told in the flashback, we're seeing the story unfold on screen. The story that never happened. That he's telling Larry and Joe that happened.
That's awesome.
And it's just like this... It's like Inception territory. You just keep going in and layer after layer.
Nice.
Another thing that's interesting to bring up is how there's no speaking female parts in the whole movie. It's not a sexist thing. It's just it's the movie's like a play. Wouldn't it be very interesting if somebody did Reservoir Dogs for the stage? Maybe it's already. There's so many things that have been adapted for the stage now. Maybe it's already happened.
If it hasn't, it needs to.
There's YouTube videos of people doing Tarantino's segment from 4 Rooms for their college play.
That's awesome.
They tone it down, of course, but
of course.
Regardless, there's one big female part, and there's an interesting story behind it. The scene where Mr. Orange gets shot, it's a woman. And she pulls it up, and he goes to commandeer her car, but she pulls a gun out of the glove compartment and shoots him in the stomach. And then he shoots her in the chest and kills her.
Oh, yeah.
That's the biggest part a woman gets in this movie. That woman was Tim Roth's dialect coach. And I guess she was really hard on him, so he really didn't like her that much. So he insisted Tarantino make her the woman that he kills.
That's awesome.
Also talking about that, there's a couple of things like they actually didn't have the money to close the streets. There's a scene where Buscemi is being chased by the cops, and then he runs out in the middle of the street, and he pulls a woman through the window of her car, which, by the way, is the same woman that accidentally gets shot by Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction.
Nice.
He pulls her out of her car, shoots at the cops, and gets in the car and drives off. Since they couldn't shut off the streets, Buscemi just had to shoot this scene when the lights were green. They just had to do it.
That's
right
great.
there in public. Another interesting thing about, I guess, the, I don't know what the makeup effects would be. I guess it would be Tim Roth's blood.
Yeah.
Like, apparently he had to lay in the blood so long that it would dry up, and it, like, took them a really long time to get him off the floor after takes.
Good God.
But, the makeup and effects guy, do you know how they hired him?
No.
He basically approached Tarantino and said, I'll tell you what, I'll do the makeup and effects for your movie if you write a script for me. That's this idea that I have.
Okay.
That script was From Dusk Till Dawn.
Nice.
So, yeah, this movie is great about one of my favorite things in the world that a director does is the long takes.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Paul Thomas Anderson does a lot of them, and Quaron in Children of Men, that's like the scene in Atonement, the scene in Goodfellas. There's so many great long take shots. The one in this one particularly, where the diner, the round shot is a long take. And the scene where Mr. Blonde is torturing Morgan, and then he goes outside. And by the way, I love the way there's no music in the movie. There's no score other than the music that's already in the movie, like the pre-existing music.
Mm-hmm.
So Madsen goes outside, and as he goes outside, Stuck in the Middle with You fades out, and we don't hear it because he's outside. And then he gets in his trunk and he gets the gas can and he goes back in, and the song fades back in. This is all in one take.
Wow.
And I love when directors do that.
I've never noticed that before, that it was in one take.
And there's, I guess we'll talk about casting now.
Okay.
The cast for this movie was all over the place for a while. It's weird to think about because the cast is just perfect the way it is. Like, everybody just, to use a cliche, fits like a glove in their parts.
Yeah, they're all spot on.
Well, here's the thing about some of the casting. I gotta remember these. For the longest time, Tarantino wanted to be Mr. Pink.
Okay.
Like, that was just set in stone. But then Steve Buscemi came in, and I guess Buscemi originally auditioned for Mr. White, but then he wanted to be Mr. Pink. And Tarantino said, well, I'm Mr. Pink, but if you can just blow me away with an audition, I'll give you Mr. Pink. So Buscemi gave him an audition, and obviously
Tarantino was not Mr. Pink.
one of Buscemi's most famous roles is Mr. Pink. If not the...
Yeah.
If you want to... That on top of his Coen Brothers part, so... Donnie from The Big Lebowski might be the biggest rival, or Carl from Fargo.
Yeah.
We won't talk about Sandler's movies, but... one of the biggest ones was James Woods. Tarantino had a part in mind for James Woods.
Okay.
But it was never specified. Apparently, I would have assumed it was Mr. White, but apparently the biggest, like, the rumor mill says it was Mr. Orange.
Wow.
But James Woods was really sought after for this part, and James Woods' agent said no. But James Woods' agent said no. That's a tongue twister, wow.
Wow, it is.
James
really is.
Woods' agent said no without asking James Woods. And James Woods met Tarantino many years later, and Tarantino told him about this, and James Woods fired his agent.
We always talk about bad things should happen to agents, so...
Michael Madsen originally went in for Mr. Pink.
Okay.
This is very interesting. He was actually rejected, but George Clooney auditioned for Mr. Blonde.
Wow.
And Walken was offered Mr. Blonde, but he said no. It didn't say why. Vincent Gallo was offered Mr. Pink, and he said no, which, you know, would have been interesting because...
Very interesting.
But he'd probably hunt me down and kill me if I said anything bad about him, so I'll just, you know, not say anything. He's a very interesting actor, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. Tim Roth was originally when Tim Roth was cast, like when he decided to put Tim Roth in the movie, he said he was either going to be Mr. Blonde or Mr. Pink.
Mm.
I'm not sure how Tim Roth ended up Mr. Orange, but and in an interesting turn of events, Robert Forster auditioned for Joe and was rejected.
Wow.
Despite having been cast in Jackie Brown later and getting an Oscar nomination for it. But yeah, that's some casting history.
Nice.
Obviously, if you're interested, the movie is also famous not only for its violence but for its profanity. Reportedly, I didn't count them myself or anything, but reportedly, the word "fuck" is said 272 times in an hour and 35 minutes.
Good God.
Which you know, when you watch the movie, is believable, I guess. Then, and you know, you got your typical Tarantino racial slurs, because Buscemi's a little heavy on them for a while. But yeah, it's weird to look at all the casting issues when it's like they were all made for the roles they were in.
Agreed. So many different things would have been the case.
And you know, it's interesting to look at how cheaply it was made, despite how great it is. Like, most of the stuff in the movie belongs to them. Like, they just rented those suits. Only, I never really noticed for the longest time, but Mr. Pink is not wearing pants to go with his suit. He's wearing black jeans, and those are black jeans that Steve Buscemi just brought from home.
That's great.
And of course, Chris Penn's jacket.
Mm.
And Mr. Blonde's car, that Cadillac, is Michael Madsen's. So, yeah, this is literally just... It's amazing how it came to be, because it was just really cheaply made for the, you know, the price of one screenplay. And just having that he just, out of complete luck, had that contact that knew Harvey Keitel. And that's what got the ball rolling. So, and then it's made history ever since. And I guess we'll address one of the biggest talked about things in the movie, the Who Shot Nice Guy Eddie controversy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know, everybody assumes, you know, maybe. Well, the big mystery was maybe, you know, somebody else in the room killed him, or maybe Mr. Pink, you know, shot him from somewhere.
Mm.
But then the thing is it didn't work out very well. But you can see, I don't know why they didn't do another take. Maybe the take just went too perfectly, and he didn't want to change it. But apparently, Mr. White was supposed to. Let's go through the whole chain of events here. Joe shoots Mr. Orange.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. White shoots Joe. Eddie shoots Mr. White. Then Mr. White is supposed to turn and shoot Eddie as he's falling. But you can barely see Harvey Keitel turn his gun. Not to mention the fact that what fucked it up was Chris Penn's squib went off too early, and he just went with it.
Nice.
Chris Penn took quite a drop in that scene too. He just threw himself back. So yeah, and then you know, just the unforgettable ending of the cops coming in and Mr. Orange confessing to Mr. White, who trusted him the whole time. And then Mr. White blows him away, and the cops blow Mr. White away. Literally, that's what they say. We're gonna fucking blow you away.
And they do.
But yeah, it's revisiting it in the theater was a big. It really helps your even if you didn't even if you already had a great appreciation of it, that just amplified it even more. So yeah, it's weird for me to put it so low when people ask me to rank Tarantino's movies, because. But, you know, we'll see as we go further into this that how that came to be. Because it kind of because Tarantino would get, you know, not necessarily bigger. I mean, in some cases, like Django's huge compared to these smaller ones, but I don't know how to describe it. Which, you know, is good when you just can't describe a movie, because it speaks for itself. Yeah, there's a reason. This is like, I can't remember what it was, but there's a particular list that calls this like the best indie movie of all time. Like the indie movie of all indie movies. So, that's pretty much the opening of this Tarantino thing for the summer. And of course next time will be Pulp Fiction, which, if you know, is my favorite movie of all time.
It's going to be really interesting.
That should be fun, and probably a little too lengthy, probably, but I'm sorry in advance. So, until then.